You're listening to the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast, a place for sex addicts to share their experiences of recovery, to help break the stigma, myths, and misconceptions of sex addiction. This podcast may contain topics of sexuality, sexual trauma, dysfunction, or other things that may be triggering, so listener discretion is advised. Hello, and welcome to the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast. My name is Jason, I'm a sex addict, and I will be your podcast host for today. How's it going, everybody? Welcome to episode 135 of the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast. This week, I'm back to sharing Joe and Charlie from the Big Book Comes Alive, and this one will be focused on the beginning of Chapter 6 into action, covering Step 5. So to catch up anyone new to the podcast, I've been sharing recordings of the AA speakers Joe and Charlie walking through the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And this all started when a listener suggested a podcast topic on Step 4. I immediately thought of Joe and Charlie's The Big Book Comes Alive talks, which I discovered on various recovery podcasts and on YouTube. I split their coverage of Step 4 into 4 separate episodes, 63, 68, 71, and 75. And it was almost a year later on episode 109 that I decided to share more of their recordings and chose to go back to the beginning on Steps 1 and 2, starting with the doctor's opinion at the beginning of the Big Book. Being that we have had a number of episodes on Step 1, I chose to continue focusing on Step 2 on episode 115 with Chapter 2, There is a Solution, and the appendix, Spiritual Experience, and then concluded with Step 2 on episode 121 with Chapter 4, We Agnostics. A few months ago on episode 127, I shared their coverage of the beginning of Chapter 5, How It Works, and Step 3. Starting the Joe and Charlie series with Step 4, we're now all caught up and now moving on to Step 5 in this episode, and the beginning of Chapter 6, Into Action. Since they cover a lot of the Big Book of AA in the recording, I chose a reading from Voices of Recovery on Step 5, and this is May 6th, which can be found on page 127. And it starts off, working the fifth step helps relieve us of the burden of our secrets, break through isolation, and face ourselves honestly in a way we cannot do alone. With the fifth step, we come out into the open. Sex Addicts Anonymous, page 37. The fifth step was a big challenge. Having a discussion with my higher power about the exact nature of my wrongs, the underlying issues and drivers, took a good deal of courage and insight into my past and present behaviors. But in that process, I gained more awareness about myself and was also able to start putting my wrongs into a healthier perspective. This started loosening the power and control they had to keep me shackled to my addiction. Sharing this story with another person was something akin to giving a first step, but with more depth and more varied emotions. It was a reasonably lengthy conversation spanning several hours. At the end of it all, another huge weight was lifted from my shoulders, and I know I laid the foundation for forgiving myself in that process. I view the fifth step as a cleaning of the slate, an opportunity to let go of many hurts and wrongs that kept me tied to the past. It enables me to spring forward with renewed energy and focus in my recovery. In the meditation, in voicing the nature of my wrongs and the anger, resentment, and pain of my past, I will give up those burdens that keep me locked in my addictive ways. So there were a few great readings to choose from in Voices of Recovery on Step 5, but I really loved the positivity in this one and looking for change. After the Joe and Charlie recording, I have another quick reading from the Big Book of AA that they did not use in this short section on Step 5, but something that I cover with my sponsees. I also have some new listener emails and YouTube comments to read, plus a few music selections. And now, without further ado, here is Joe and Charlie from the Big Book Comes Alive covering Step 5 and Chapter 6, Into Action. I hope you enjoy it.
This chapter is Chapter 6. It's called Into Action. It's not into thinking. It's into action. And action is a magic word in Alcoholics Anonymous. It says, having made our personal inventory, well, what should we do about it? Now, that's a good question, isn't it? Well, we've been trying to get a new attitude. Remember, Dr. Jung said ideas, emotions, and attitudes were the guiding force of the lives of these people are suddenly cast to one side. So we're trying to get a new attitude and a new relationship with our Creator. Remember back on page 45, it said the main object of this book was to enable me to find a power greater than myself which would solve my problem. So I'm trying to get a new attitude, a new relationship with my Creator, and discover the obstacles in our path. And what are some of those obstacles? The resentments, the fears, the guilt, shame, remorse, the harm we've done to other people. Those are some of our obstacles in our path. We admitted certain defects. And what are those defects? Column 5, selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, frightened, and inconsiderate attitudes. We've ascertained in a rough way what the trouble is. We'll put our finger on the weak items in our personal inventory. Now these are about to be cast out. This requires action on our part, which when completed will mean that we've admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our defects. This brings us to the 5th step in the program of recovery mentioned in the preceding chapter.
Okay, we've got to stop now and look at a couple of words. We know that Step 5 says, we admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. But if you'll notice here in the narrative, he said this requires action on our part, which when completed will mean that we've admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our defects. In the step itself, he used the word wrongs. But in the narrative here, he uses the word defects. And people used to ask Bill about this. And they would say, Bill, why did you use wrongs in Step 5, but in the narrative you used the word defects? And by the way, Bill, what's the difference anyhow between a wrong in 5, a defect in 6, and a shortcoming in 7? Now, Joe and I, we've known two ladies that worked with and for Bill for years, and they both tell us the same thing. People would ask Bill that question, and he would kind of rear back and smile. And he said, when I took English and writing courses in college, they taught me not to use the same words over and over and over. Shows how dumb you are if you do.
You know.
He said there's really no difference in these things. He said in Step 4, we're going to find those things that block us from God. In Step 5, we're going to talk about them to another human being. In Step 6, we're going to be willing to have God remove them. In Step 7, we're going to ask Him to take them away. And he said you can call them anything you want to. A wrong, a fault, a mistake, a defect, a shortcoming, a personality flaw, or whatever you wish to. And we're convinced in our mind that Bill's just simply used these words interchangeably so he wouldn't be repeating himself over and over and over using the same term. Later on, I followed it up into the 12 and 12. And not only does it in 12 and 12, he does it even worse there than he did in the big book. And we're going to see him do it again here 2 or 3 times in this area of 5, 6, and 7.
He said this is perhaps difficult, especially discussing our defects.
There he does it again. Instead of wrongs, he uses the word defects.
With another person. We think we've done well enough at admitting these things to ourselves. Well, there's doubt about that. In actual practice, we usually find that a solitary self-appraisal is insufficient. Many of us are necessary to go much further. We'd be more reconciled discussing ourselves with another person when we see a good reason why we should do so. Well, the best reason first. If we skip this vital step, we may not overcome drinking. It's a good idea, a good reason to go ahead and do the fifth step so we can overcome the drinking. Here's a solitary self-appraisal was insufficient. I did the very best I could do filling out these forms with the limited knowledge that I have. And by the way, I don't know of anybody in AA anywhere that's ever done this inventory process perfectly. So you won't be the first, so don't even try. But a solitary self-appraisal is insufficient. I did the best I could do with filling out these forms. To give you an idea why a solitary self-appraisal is insufficient, I can look around the rooms here today and see your defects of character very, very plainly. There's one sitting right here on the front row. See, there's nothing between me and Jim except air. I can see him plainly, he can see me plainly. But you see, I can't see me plainly because there's a lifetime of rationalization and justification in me that I just can't see past. I need another human being to look at me and look at these things objectively to help me see things that I couldn't see.
The book says time after time newcomers have tried to keep to themselves certain facts about their lives. Trying to avoid this humbling experience, they've turned to easier methods. Almost invariably, they got drunk. Having persevered with the rest of the program, they wondered why they fell. Well, we think the reason is that they never completed their house cleaning. They took inventory all right, but hung on to some of the worst items in stock. They only thought they had lost their egoism and fear. They only thought they had humbled themselves, but they had not learned enough of humility, fearlessness, and honesty in the sense we find it necessary until they told someone else all their life story. Now that's the little statement that fouled us up in step 4. Didn't know how to do step 4, so we read about all our life story and we started writing our life story for a step 4. And like we said yesterday, I didn't really learn anything to contribute to my alcoholism by the writing of my life story. If the guy I took it to, if he had really known what he was doing, he might have been able to help me see these things. But he didn't know any more about it than I did. So he just read it and threw it in the waste paper basket. 95% of my life story has nothing to do with my alcoholism anyhow. But I tell you what I've done. If I've done the inventory the way the big book says, I've shared all my life story resentment-wise. They didn't come in my mind just yesterday. They've been popping in my head as far back as I can remember. Some of mine went all the way back to my early childhood. I've shared all my life story resentment-wise. If I did the inventory the way the book says, I've shared all my fears. I've shared all my life story fears-wise. Those fears didn't come in my head just today. They've been popping in my head as far back as I can remember, all the way back to my childhood. If I've shared all my harms done to others, sexually and otherwise, I've shared all my life story harms-wise. I didn't hurt people just yesterday. I've been hurting people all my life. My mother said to me one time, she said, "Charlie, you were the meanest kid I ever saw." She said, "I had a little problem loving you myself." When Mama's got a problem loving you, look out, there's something going on. I shared all my life story harms-wise. And you know, that really is my life story. It revolves around resentments and fears and harms and guilt and remorse and all that kind of stuff. So if we've done it the way the big book says to do it, you know, we have no argument with this statement at all. We have shared all of our life story with another human being. Now here's why we really need to do it. More than most people, the alcoholic leads a double life. He's very much the actor. To the outer world, he presents his stage character. This is the one he likes his fellows to see. He wants to enjoy a certain reputation, but knows in his heart he doesn't deserve it. The inconsistency is made worse by the things he does on his sprees. Coming to his senses, he's revolted at certain episodes he vaguely remembers. These memories are a nightmare. He trembles to think someone might have observed him. As fast as he can, he pushes his memories far inside himself. He hopes they will never see the light of day. He is under constant fear and tension, and that makes for more drinking. Psychologists are inclined to agree with us. We have spent thousands of dollars for examinations. We know but few instances where we've given these doctors a fair break. We have seldom told them the whole truth, nor have we followed their advice. Unwilling to be honest with these sympathetic men, we were honest with no one else. Small wonder many in the medical profession have a low opinion of alcoholics and their chance of recovery. I think we have to face the fact that we alcoholics have become the world's greatest con artists. You have to if you're going to be a practicing alcoholic. You can't be a practicing alcoholic unless you learn how to lie, how to steal, how to cheat, how to con, how to manipulate. And I think the one we have to con the most is ourselves. I don't think we could live with ourselves if we had to honestly see what's going on when we're out there doing our thing. But you see, we never have to see those things because we have that convenient little thing called resentments. And we play them over and over and over in our head and gradually transfer all blame to others and make ourselves as pure as the driven snow. Now, if you've been doing that for 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, or 40 years, it's almost impossible to be honest with yourself. We do the best we can in step 4. Now then, I need to take this to another human being, one who has walked this walk before me, one who understands steps 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, according to the Big Book Alcoholics Anonymous, and have them help me see those things I can't see about me. They're not going to change anything in column 1. They're not going to change anything in column 2. They're probably going to change some things in column 3, where I said this particular thing was caused by the sex instinct. He said, oh, no. You're just trying to build your self-esteem here. That's all you're doing. Sex really doesn't have a hell of a lot to do with this. Probably not going to change anything in column 4. May change some things in column 5. I said this one was caused by fear. He said, oh, no, this is just plain damn dishonesty. That's all this is. And he helped me see things about me I can't see. The greatest spiritual minds in the world today will tell you the same thing. They never make decisions without first checking it with somebody else to make sure they're looking at it truthfully. I've been sober 35 years. I'm coming on 36. And I've got a sponsor today. And he's been sober the same length of time I have, 6 months more than I have. He never lets me forget it either. He reminds me of that. And if I got something real important in my life that I've got to make a decision on, I always go talk to him. And I'm amazed how many times he says, Charlie, you're blowing smoke up your tail again. This is not true. And he helps me see things I can't see about me. That old rationalization and justification steps in and makes me believe some things that aren't true sometimes. I don't think we'll ever get over it. We need this. Now, I know confession is good for the soul. And if you belong to a religion that requires it, you need to go do that. But I still think we need then to take this to somebody who really understands our program. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, according to the Big Book. Yeah, otherwise it's just going to be a confession. But those that really understand this can help us see the things we can't see about ourselves. Page 74. Page 74 deals with who to take this thing with. Now, you got to remember, in 1939, when the book was published, the first person in California, they didn't have an AA sponsor to go to. The first one in Florida didn't have an AA sponsor. It was difficult for them to find somebody to take this 5th step with. That's what page 74 is dealing with. But today we got plenty of good AA sponsors. We got plenty of good AA members that understand step 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 and can help us see those things we can't see. For me, that's the criteria for who we should take it with. If you belong to that religion, go do it. And hopefully the priest might be a member of AA, and they can really help you with it. But if they don't understand 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, then we need to get with somebody that understands those things, can help us really see these things that we just simply can't see for ourselves. Page 75 tells us how to do this step.
It said on page 75, when we decide who is to hear our story, we waste no time. There's that time factor again. We have a written inventory and are prepared for a long talk. We explain to our partner what we're about to do and why we have to do it. He should realize that we're engaged upon a life and death errand. Most people approached in this way will be glad to help. They'll be honored by our competence. I went over to see my sponsor, Franklin, at that time, and he knew I was coming. I said, well, I'm here to do my inventory. And he said, that's good, Joe. I said, but first of all, let's you and I do the third step prayer and ask God to be with us in this process. That's the kind of sponsor that he was, thank God. And we sat there and began to do my inventory. Now these forms really come in handy now. I mean, really come in handy. Now, I can discuss these items from left to right, rather than from top to bottom, column to column. I go from left to right, all the way across, gleaning all the information that I can from those columns, and him asking me questions about this particular incident or person, how it affected me, what they do, and what I should have done. Ask me all those questions all the way across. Keeps us in some kind of an order, too. And I can talk about these things all I wish to. I can tell someone else all my life story, resentment-wise now. And this will keep us in order. When we get through with that first one, then we go to the second one. Discuss it all the way across. Left to right, all the way across, gleaning all the information that we can from it. Him asking me questions about these situations, helping me see things I couldn't see. When that's done, we go to the next one, and the next one, and the next one. Keeps you in some kind of order and helps you see things that you couldn't see by him asking questions of things about these situations. Very, very important at these forms at this time. Our book says that we pocket our pride to go to it, illuminating every twisted character, every dark cranny of the past. Once having taken this step, withholding nothing, we get some more promises.
Here's some more promises now.
We can look the world in the eye. We can be alone at perfect peace and ease. Our fears fall from us. We begin to feel the nearness of our Creator. We may have had certain spiritual beliefs, but
Step 2, we came to believe.
But now we begin to have a spiritual experience. The feeling that the drink problem has disappeared will often come strongly. We feel as we're on a broad highway walking hand in hand with the spirit of the universe. I don't know about you, but I used to lay awake nights thinking, if I could ever get all this stuff back to zero, if I could ever fix those particular situations, everything would be okay. Well, now after doing this inventory and doing step 5, I could see the steps ahead. I was anxious then to do these steps ahead because I wanted to get it back to zero just one time. And this was a starting place for me to do that. And I love this step 5 and the information that I learned from it, because then I could repair the damage done in the past.
Wow, so yeah, that was a quick recording. Right where I cut it off, they were just about to start talking about step 6. In the chapter Into Action, the first 3.5 pages talk about step 5, and then just 2 paragraphs on steps 6 and 7, a longer section on steps 8 and 9, and closing out that chapter with steps 10 and 11. I have the Big Book Comes Alive as a 10 CD set, and this one was just starting out on disc 9. So the next few steps will be a lot quicker, and I will probably choose to group the next few recordings 2 steps at a time. So I did mention at the beginning of this episode that there was something that I wished to read from the Big Book that they did not cover in this, but I do believe they covered in step 4. As part of the 5th step process with my sponsees, as we read through each resentment, left to right, we ended with saying a prayer that can be found on page 67, and it reads, This is a sick man. How can I be helpful to him? God save me from being angry. Thy will be done. When looking at step 5, we're not only talking about the exact nature of our wrongs to fellow human beings, but also bringing a higher power into it. And during step work, I often start and end each session with the Serenity Prayer. I did notice in the recording that they talked about using the 3rd step prayer to invite a higher power into the conversation. But yeah, I really love the prayer that is there in step 4 to help close out each resentment and hopefully begin to let that one go. So with that, I wanted to move on to some listener emails and YouTube comments. The only YouTube comment that we've had recently came from episode 67 with COSA speaker Teresa D. And it says, "For a long time, I didn't believe that my acting out behavior would harm others. Once I acquired an STD and passed it on to others, and I realized that I was harming others and myself." And thank you so much for that comment. Yeah, going through the steps and learning about ourselves, we start to see how we're not the only one affected by our addiction, that there are people around us in our lives that are either directly or indirectly affected by our actions. And being able to listen to the stories of COSAs, like this episode, helps build empathy, and I am so grateful for this opportunity that we have with the SAA and COSA speaker meetings to be able to hear that, and also at Healthy Intimate Relationship meetings, HIR meetings, and any open COSA meetings. Being able to hear from COSAs really helps to build empathy and to understand that our acting out behavior does affect others. With that, I wanted to move on to emails. And we received this one from the beginning of June, and it is titled Faith and Patience. And I now finally have a chance to read it here. It's been a busy month. And it says, "Hi, Jason. My name is R. I'm a sex addict and an alcoholic. I absolutely love listening to the show and very grateful for finding it. I'm learning that faith without works is dead, and I think a key part of the work is being patient. To me, faith is unwavering trust in the providence of God, His provisions, protection, and guidance. And patience is the capacity to tolerate delay, trouble, or suffering without getting angry or upset. Faith sets the vision and instills the belief that it's attainable. Patience provides the endurance needed to get to that vision. Patience always has a long-term perspective in view. Too often I am committed to the end result, but not the process. When I allow patience to guide me, it makes me realistic. Patience is the key to perseverance. It'll enable me to continue to work towards my goal despite things taking long. Patience protects me from deception. While I'm being patient, I'll get opportunities for shortcuts." Yeah, thank you so much for that email. And yeah, I really love what you had to share with the community here on patience and faith. With that, I wanted to move on to some music that really ties into this email. 2 songs in particular, The Patient by Tool and Somebody Prayed by Crowder. I believe I've talked about The Patient as being the first song on one of my spiritual mixes. It has an instrumental intro called Aeon Blue Apocalypse. The bulk of the song is called The Patient. In the playlist that I've decided to share with the public on Spotify and Apple Music, SARP Spiritual Playlists, I have both of those tracks there. But for this episode, I'm going to be focusing on the main song, The Patient. Aeon Blue Apocalypse is just a mellow guitar intro, and the first couple minutes of The Patient is a mellow tune, and I wanted to play a little of the transition as it changes from a mellow song to a heavy song. And it also talks about faith, giving blood, keeping faith, and I'm still right here. As it transitions, says, gonna wait it out, be patient. And so here is the transition part in The Patient. Yeah, so awesome. A little bit later in the song gets to my favorite part, and there's a breakdown that's got some heavy guitars and the refrain, be patient, and the crescendo to, I must keep reminding myself of this. And so when I am out of patience, this is what goes through my head. Be patient, I must keep reminding myself of this. I must keep reminding myself of this. So here is that part of The Patient from Tool. Just love that, and took me a long time to really grasp the concepts of this song. When this album came out, I was just entering the program and really connected with a few songs, but this one, as I got further into my recovery, I really started to love this one. So, like I mentioned, the beginning does touch on faith, and the main focus on that song is patience. And I got an email from past guest Josh, and I've read some of his emails and played some music from his spiritual playlist. And one of the songs that I've played before is from the band Crowder, and he let me know that Crowder has a new album out. And one of the songs is called Somebody Prayed. And this has a lot to do with faith and hitting rock bottom and the power of prayer. So I wanted to play some of Crowder, Somebody Prayed.
For the child of God is far from home, the one who thinks they're too far gone. I'm throwing out another prayer in day. Worn out altars, tear-stained pews, still I won't give up on you. I believe that anything can change when somebody prays. So I hit my knees, 'cause I've seen all heaven move. I pray, Father, please, 'cause I've seen what He can do. These hands have no power, but there ain't an hour He don't come through. That's why when mountains move, I say, looks like somebody prayed.
Yeah, really cool. And I love that idea of hitting bottom and having a way to pull us out of that into something better. Prayer for me was something that didn't come natural, and my years in program, it has really, really helped me out. The last song that I wanted to play was from Dream Theater, and this song is called This Dying Soul. I played Dream Theater on episode 32 of the podcast when talking about the 9th step promises, and their song Repentance is specifically about steps 8 and 9. Mike Portnoy, the drummer, wrote a few songs over a number of albums that comprise the 12-step suite, and This Dying Soul is one of those songs, and it covers steps 4 and 5. What I really love about This Dying Soul and Repentance is there is a common musical phrase that happens, and so I wanted to play that part of the song. And again, this is from the beginning of the song where it's more focused on step 4. So here is Dream Theater and This Dying Soul.
Hello, mirror, so glad to see you, my friend. It's been a while, searching, fearless. Where do I begin to heal this wound of self-denial?
Yeah, this is an awesome song. It's about 11 minutes or so. The second half on step 5 was really awesome, but I couldn't find a quick sample that I could use for the podcast. The beginning has a nice verse and chorus type of feel, whereas the second half, the lyrics are very quick and non-repetitive, so it was hard for me to focus on something. But yes, This Dying Soul does cover both steps 4 and 5. On the SARP Music and Recovery playlist that I've made, and this covers every song that I've played here on the podcast, I decided to throw in all of the songs from the 12-step suite when talking about that on episode 32. I did talk about the 12-step suite, and so in that section of the playlist, I've got all of those songs listed. I'll list them out here as well in the show notes, but I really wanted to play This Dying Soul for this episode on step 5. So with all of that out of the way, I'm going to close up this episode. If you wanted to leave feedback to be read on the podcast, you can reach us at feedback@sexaddictsrecoverypod.com. And if you wanted to be a guest on the podcast or part of a panel, have any questions about the podcast or the program, you can reach me personally at jason@sexaddictsrecoverypod.com. I've mentioned over the past few weeks that I will be doing a music and recovery panel episode for episode 138, The Misfits of Recovery. And I did receive an email there, and we'll be setting up a recording for the end of July on that one. So I still have some room available if anyone wants to join. Last week, I was up in Sacramento and got to record as part of a panel discussion on sponsorship, and the workshop went 2 hours. I'm going to try to edit that one down, so it may take a while before I can get that episode fully completed and out. I did have a few other guests that I'm trying to set up times for recording. Last week was a crazy week for me. I was working off-site and had very minimal time to work on the podcast and sending out emails. So hopefully I'll be back to that this week. So with that, I'll close out this episode. I am super grateful for everyone that has tuned into this one. And as always, keep coming back. The views and opinions contained in the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of the Bay Area Intergroup or the ISO of SAA.